it out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 564th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and the amazing Tom Fennell, the Invisible Man.
In the flesh,
in the flesh, but not in the studio. He is not really invisible. I've actually seen him, as have people who have watched this show for a while. Okay, today is the 14th of March, and we are starting with news from the 7th of March, working up to the 13th. And once again, this news that we're talking about can all be found at my blog, geoharvey.com. And you can click on the calendar and find a news item among the various things for the day that you click on. We're starting on the 7th of March. You can also go to a couple of web addresses farther down on the page here. One of them is for the site that Tom and I used to put this show together, which has just the things that we are talking about. And the other is a file of that, the computer file of that same web page that you can download. And in both cases, you can go to links inside the whatever is there.
The second one has more information about the sources.
Okay, all right.
Is that true?
No, I don't think it is, Tom. I think they're both pretty much the same. When I put the second one together, it's taken directly from the first one, except that it has some notes at the end.
It has what?
Notes at the end. And we don't talk about those notes in the show.
Right.
Okay, so our first article is from The Guardian, which is weird because it's not Clean Technica. How about that?
How about that?
Okay, we have a picture of solar panels here over a lawn that appears, it looks like somebody's been mowing it. And yeah,
certainly looks like it.
The article is from The Guardian, and you have a title, I'll betcha.
It comes from The Guardian, and it says, and I quote, UK's green power industry receives a surprise £10 billion pledge. By the way, a pound is $1.28. Okay, thank you. When I was a kid, it was $2.80, and it was that for a long time. Used to be $5.
It used to be $5, yeah, until the Second World War. And there was a movie that came out about why there was terrible inflation in the UK during the war. It was largely because of a lot of counterfeit money was being put into the market.
Well, when I was a kid, a pound was slang for $5.
Yep. And as a matter of fact, a pound had 20 shillings in it, which meant that a shilling was a 20th of $5. And in Canada, shillings and quarters just kind of passed interchangeably. Okay. The synopsis for this article is Britain's stressed green power industry has received a surprise fillip after Nat Power, a renewable startup that's part of the larger European group, pledged to put £10 billion into what would become the largest portfolio of battery storage projects in the country. That's a lot That's a lot of battery storage.
It is, absolutely.
Okay, and of course the reason why they're doing that is batteries are probably the fastest growing technology in this part of the market. Solar,
they've been lagging for a long, long time.
Yeah. Solar is growing fast, but batteries are growing faster. Maybe as fast,
Yep.
But pretty fast. Okay.
They're going fast.
They are. Let's go along. We have a picture now. It's a graph of average natural gas spot prices on the Henry Hub, which is an important natural gas power hub in North America. This is from Clean Technica.
Henry Hub, daily natural gas spot price fell to record lows in February.
Right. Because of high production and relatively low consumption, less natural gas has been withdrawn from storage this winter. U.S. natural gas inventories have been above average. Relatively high storage levels indicate an oversupplied market, reducing the natural gas price. Now, of course, that has an effect on electricity prices at the wholesale level, but you know, electricity prices are so controlled in much of the country that most people won't see a difference. But I don't think this is going to lead to new natural gas plants being built, because they just aren't being built much these days.
Well, I think people are seeing the writing on the wall.
Yeah, I think they are. I think you're right. And the other thing about this is if you can't get a lot of money for the natural gas, then what's the point of drilling for it? So, you know, that's a business I would not want to be in. Okay, should we go on?
Can't chance.
Okie doke. Now, this next picture is a picture of Baku, which is, I believe, the capital of Azerbaijan. And it reminds me very much that I don't know much about Azerbaijan. Do you, Tom?
Nobody knows anything about it.
Well, there are people who actually live there, Tom.
But they really don't want people much to know about them.
Oh, okay. I will take your word for it. This is from Azer News, and it's what they're willing to tell us about what's going on in Azerbaijan.
Which is, and I quote, Azerbaijan predicts mutual benefits of foreign investment in the construction of a solar power plant.
Yeah. W. Haas Future GmbH et Co., a German firm, so the Azerbaijan people are willing to talk to Germans, I guess, said it was ready to invest more than €300, that is 300 million euros, to establish solar power stations in Kyrgyzstan, according to the Azer News. Of course, the Azer News would tell us about what's going on in Kyrgyzstan. The company is also considering wind energy along with solar power. How very, very strange. What do you think, Tom?
Stranger things have never been heard.
Yeah, right. I'll tell you, I think that's a very pretty picture, but I'm not sure that I'd want to live there. So I like Vermont. I think I'll stay here. And that's the reason why, by the way, our next picture is from Killington. That's right here in Vermont, isn't it?
It is that.
This is from the Energy Mix. What do you got?
The snow on the ground.
Yeah.
Vermont governor opposes ambitious renewable energy bill over costs.
Right. Citing a disputed cost study, remember, he's citing a cost study that's disputed here. Vermont Governor Phil Scott is pushing back against a bill mandating faster, wider adoption of renewable energy by power utilities. House Bill 289 would require utilities to purchase 100% of their electric power from renewable sources by 2030.
That's coming up pretty soon.
It's coming up soon, no question about it.
It's doable, but it's not easy.
It's
they got to think about what they're doing.
Well,
by the way, Phil Scott's a Republican, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's a Republican. And I've never voted for him. How about that? I was a Republican. I was a Republican my whole life until 2003, which is when I figured out that the Republican Party was blocking information about climate change. And I did that by looking at growing the energy, the heat zone maps, the the maps that are being used by gardeners and farmers and arborists and so forth to figure out what they can plant in terms of perennial plants, because certain things will survive and certain things won't. And here in Brattleboro, I actually spent every day during the winter, I didn't spend the day, but at some point during every morning when I got up early before sunrise, I would look and see what time what the temperature was outside. And the cold,
relatively warm winter.
The coldest temperature we have had this winter, from my measurements, was 7 degrees above zero. That's the coldest. And
that's pretty warm.
That is more than pretty warm. This is like, I remember winters when the coldest temperature was 30 below almost. And
wow.
A lot of that, not in Brattleboro, because I wasn't in Brattleboro when that happened, but in places like Marlboro or Winchester, New Hampshire, where I used to live, we'd get to 30 below zero on those mountaintops. And it's amazing what the difference is between the mountaintop and the bottom, because some nights it's much colder on the mountaintop, and some nights it's much colder at the bottom of the mountain. And that has to do with a question of wind power, and cold air going down the hill because it falls. Okay, we have a picture next of a dog.
Looks like a dog to me. Kind of a lazy dog.
Well, this dog is not lazy. This dog is too hot.
It's a dog on a hot day.
It's a dog on a hot day. And every time I hear somebody say that, I think of that movie title called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Anyway, this is from CNN. What do you have for a title?
The planet just shattered heat records for the 9th month in a row.
Yeah.
Not good.
No, this is not good. I agree with you, Tom. Last month was the hottest February on record. Each of the last 9 months set a record for heat. Copernicus data shows February was 1.77 degrees Celsius warmer than the average February in pre-industrial times. Now remember, we've got a limit here that we're trying to hit of 1.5 degrees, and this is more than a quarter degree above that. The last 12-month period was 1.56 degrees above pre-industrial limits.
And we got to hit 177?
This was 1.77. And they're saying that we'll probably have a few more months of record-breaking heat, because part of the heat was due to climate change, part of it was due to El Nino. And the El Nino was particularly tough this year, and so we've had high temperatures. And, it's like the Great Lakes, 5% of the Great Lakes froze this year. 5%.
And some years they've frozen solid, one side to the other.
Yeah, frozen solid. If there was any water, it was down by Chicago, or maybe even farther south than Chicago, and there's not a lot farther south than Chicago on the Great Lakes. Tom, when I was in college, I had a roommate who lived on Peaks Island in Maine. It's in Casco Bay, where Portsmouth is. And he told me his father would, when he was very young, would drive from Peaks Island to the mainland on ice.
On ice, yeah.
In a truck. You can't do that anymore. You haven't been able. I asked him about it at the time. He said, "No, that's the old days. You can't do that anymore." He was telling me this in 1967. Or maybe even 1966, but it was.
This isn't sudden.
The climate change is not sudden, and it has come on slowly. And this, I think it's a myth about frog in the water, not noticing that the temperature is being raised until its brain cooks, and then it just sits there and dies. I have been told that that's a myth, but nevertheless, people are acting kind of like that. They don't remember how cold it was. They don't remember, that the winters were longer and things like that. And they are, and climate change is happening. And there are still people who are saying, no, it isn't happening. Well, I don't know where they get that. I think they get it from Newsmax or something. Anyway, what?
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Somebody is telling them this stuff, which they're telling them because they want to, they've got a political motive or they want to prevent loss of money. Anyway, we have more.
Coming up of a Ford E-Transit electric van.
That's it. And this is from Clean Technica.
What does it say on it? 100% renewable?
What's that?
What does it say on the side of the van? 100% renewable?
I think that's what it says. 100% electric is what it says.
100% electric, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah.
I'll buy that.
What do you got for a title?
Ford pops the E-Transit van out of the stealth mode to boost EV sales.
Yeah, the good news about EV sales keeps pouring in. Now, naysayers have been saying they're terrible, but they're not. So don't believe what naysayers say. Ford Motor Company racked up a strong performance in February with a 93% uptick in sales of the F-150 Lightning year on year, and a 64% increase for the Mustang Mach-E. Ford released the all-electric E-Transit to keep things going. And that in
Mustang Mach-E is electric, huh?
The Mach-E, Mustang Mach-E is a Mustang, but it's electric, and in its fastest configuration, it's an incredibly fast car. Anyway, there you see the E-Transit. So things are happening. Okay, now we're up to Sunday, March 9th.
We got a picture of an offshore wind farm. How about that?
These are floating turbines, and the float in each case is carrying 2 turbines.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? That's correct.
Yep, this is from Clean Technica.
Fish to frolic among floating offshore wind turbines.
Yeah, I'll bet they will. They'll probably dance down there. A rise of the offshore wind industry has sparked a new movement to piggyback other marine activities onto offshore wind farms. In the latest development, a unique 2-headed floating wind turbine has been tapped to host a commercial fish farm off the coast of Sweden. Who'd have thought?
That's interesting.
We will get back to this business of piggybacking out at sea, or maybe we have no. We talked about it last week. We had floating solar panels along with wind turbines.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay. This is a picture which I think is just wonderful. A picture of a tree.
Several trees, bare trees, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, they are. They remind me.
Not B-E-A-R.
Yes, that's right. This is from CNN. The picture of the tree reminds me of a yew tree that grew in the churchyard of the church in a village that I used to live in Devon. And that yew tree, I have no idea how old it was, but it was the yew tree, according to lore, had been there for a long time when the church was built during the 13th century. So it was pretty old.
So that's a yew tree Y-E-W, not a new tree N-E-W.
That's correct. And these trees are not yew trees. Yew trees are evergreen. Or so I'm told. I wasn't there during the winter. Okay, what do you got for a title?
Winter is over, and it was the warmest on record. Here's what the U.S. missed out on this season.
Okay, I want to point out right from the start here that winter is not over yet. It
was 60 degrees yesterday.
It was what?
60.
It was, yeah, and it's going to be hotter today. NOAA maintains a different winter than the rest of us, and they say that winter starts on the 1st of December and ends on the 1st of March. So that's where they say winter is over. This winter was the warmest on record for the lower 48, according to NOAA. And the records go back to the late 1800s. The singular,
warmest on record. Wow.
yeah, the singularly mild winter left vast areas of the country without typical amounts of snow and ice, fueling a worsening drought. Now,
Well, we didn't get much snow.
we didn't get much snow. That drought has been moving from the West Coast gradually eastward, and now it's kind of in the Midwest. And I don't know if it's going to reach us or not. I certainly hope it doesn't, because I don't like droughts. I don't like sunshine much because I had a pale complexion and red hair, very red hair.
Did you really?
I did, absolutely.
I'd love to see you with red hair. How about that? I'd love to see you with red hair. How about that?
Well, I'm not going to dye my hair, Tom. I'm sorry. I like you, but I'm not going to do that for you. I just won't. Okay. Our next image is an offshore wind farm, and this comes from Electrek. This is Electrek. And I don't think that's spelled properly, but that's how they spell it.
Well, you're right in both cases.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way they spell it.
Yes. What do you got for a title?
Virginia could make almost $5 billion from this 3.5 gigawatt offshore wind farm. Wow.
Yeah. The 180 turbine Kitty Hawk Wind is an offshore wind farm proposed in federal waters over 36 miles from Virginia Beach. It could deliver 3.5 gigawatts of electricity and around $5 billion in economic impact for Virginia.
Did they put that on hold?
The usual types of opposition are seeking to prevent it from happening. Now, what do you think of that?
Haven't they just put that on hold?
I don't know. They might have. They might have.
Yeah.
What it reminds me of, 36 miles, you won't be able to see that from Virginia Beach.
So you got to have real good eyes to do so.
You would need a telescope and an airplane, because you wouldn't be able to see it from ground level, I don't think.
I was just going to say you have to be way up in the air.
Yeah, and Virginia Beach doesn't have big mountains. I can tell you that. I've never been there, but I've seen pictures. Okay, I was told once that an offshore wind farm, which was eventually killed off Cape Cod, was being backed by the Audubon Society, because the Audubon Societies of Massachusetts and Maine, because the Audubon Society had been bought off by big wind. And I thought when I heard that, how would this person know if the Audubon Society was bought off? How would they know? And second of all, why would the Audubon Society take money from the wind industry when it could get 10 times as much from the oil industry or the gas industry, and it would have these people who just are agitators being in favor of closing this stuff down. So I decided I would find out who Big Wind was.
Uh-huh.
So I went and I found a list. This was in 2016. I went and found a list of the 63 biggest companies in the world. And what I found was none of them was a wind turbine maker. Sorry, one of them was. It was General Electric, but wind turbines were a very small part of their business.
Okay.
20 of the companies were in the oil and gas sector, and one of them, which was not in the oil and gas sector, but was listed as a, what is the word for consolidating companies when you have a company that consolidates other companies?
Holding company.
Well, it wasn't listed as a holding company, but it was listed as a company that was in many areas, and that was Koch Industries. So it was Koch Industries and 20 companies in oil and gas, And then I went to find out what was the story with the wind industry, and I found that the whole wind industry, all makes, all models worldwide, had a gross income from turbine sales of $96 billion. Now that sounds like a lot of money, except every one of those 63 companies made, to get on that list, at least $100 billion. So every one of those 21 companies that were
They're doing okay, aren't they?
They were at the time, they aren't anymore. Most of those companies are no longer among the biggest companies on earth. The oil and gas industry has suffered very badly in the last 10 years. So that's what they were afraid of, and that's what they got.
Yeah.
And considering the way that they've been trying to control the market in a monopolistic fashion, I kind of feel like that's what they deserved. They deserved to lose a large part of the market because they were lying, cheating, stealing, and killing and I do mean killing because, you know, hundreds of people in Vermont die from air pollution every year. And
Vermont's got relatively clean air.
Yeah, compared to a lot of other places. Okay, we are up to Sunday, the 10th of March, and we have an item from Clean Technica. And
that's a picture of an electric VTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle.
That's correct, yes.
See the upwardly pointed propellers.
Yep, and downwardly pointed propellers. They have them in both directions. Those round things in the front of the wings, I kind of think might be portholes, so people can see out.
Okay.
Because I just don't know. Anyway, this is from Clean Technica. So what do you got?
Electricity in airplanes, lowering the carbon emissions of flight.
We have two news stories that focus on different ways of using electricity to reduce carbon emissions of airplanes. The first comes from Mercedes-Benz about an electric refueling vehicle for airplanes. In other words, they're driving it out when the airplane is on the ground and refueling it in the airport. The other
carrying fuel for other vehicles.
It's carrying fuel for electric. It's hooking up electric airplanes. The other is from Airbus about an eVTOL passenger vehicle, and that is what I think we have a picture of. And by the way, this particular story at Clean Technica talks about the fact that it has two stories, but it doesn't have two stories. Clean Technica, I'm sorry. It has two stories, but we have another one coming up in this show, which is neither of the two. So I'm going to go and take care of the next story, which is about
a highway intersection.
Yeah. And this is a really interesting one. It is not what you would expect, and it comes from Clean Technica, which has got huge numbers of stories about cars. And in this particular case, Steve Hanley, who is, I think, a pretty good writer, wrote this. And you read this is a highway intersection. It's not the one that appears at the story because I couldn't figure out the copyrights for that. This one is from Unsplash. What do you have for title?
Whether powered by electrons or molecules, automobiles are a curse. Wow.
Yeah, he's serious about this. After readers commented that there were too many cars on the road, Bloomberg ran a story entitled, quote, "EVs can't fix a global epidemic of car harm, a study finds," end quote. The modern world moves itself around in roughly 2 billion motor vehicles, 65% of which are cars, according to Bloomberg. So what do you think of that?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Automobiles are a curse, but they're a little bit more efficient than horses.
Oh, I think that they're far less, well, it depends on how you measure efficiency. You can get from Brattleboro to Bellows Falls quicker in a car than you would with a horse.
That's for sure.
Absolutely. But you're comparing something that would use a gallon or two of gas as opposed to somebody who just eats some grass, So what are you talking about? It depends what you mean. Okay, should we go on, Tom?
It is.
Our next picture is a picture of a Rivian R2. And by the way, I noticed in the news today, and this is weird when you consider this story, the folks at Rivian are thinking about going into bankruptcy.
No kidding.
Yeah, but let's deal with the story that we've got, okay? This is from ABC News.
Rivian CEO says he's changing mindsets of what's possible in an electric vehicle. Now, what does that mean?
Well, let's see what the synopsis says. A common complaint of EVs is that they're too expensive. That's why Rivian, the electric car maker in Irvine, California, just launched 3 new models to meet this huge need in the market. And that is according to R.J. Scaringe, Rivian's founder and CEO. Now, I find it kind of remarkable that they would introduce 3 models one day and then 3 days later they're talking about bankruptcy. They must have been thinking about bankruptcy when they released these models. I think they're...
Oh, yeah, they were. I'm sure they were.
Yeah, they are... Yeah, they are hoping that these cheaper models are going to prove to be a real market boon for them. And honestly, I've been watching this for a long time, and at the prices of these models, I think the least expensive one is considerably below $30,000. At the prices of these models, I think Rivian could have a very big market in the United States with these cars. And especially considering, and this is something else that appeared, there's basically talk that there isn't any way we could produce tariffs on Chinese vehicles that would protect American car makers from the Chinese vehicles. And the reason for that is because the Chinese are starting to make their Chinese vehicles in Mexico. So they're no longer Chinese cars, they're Mexican.
Are we going to talk about that? Because I just noticed that.
Oh, okay. So that isn't today's news. It's something we're going to talk about. Good. So people can get clarification on that. We are up to Monday, 11th of March, and we have a picture of a storm. Isn't that exciting?
Looks like a storm to me. Looks pretty stormy.
It does. I always loved electric storms until I got hit by lightning. Okay.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah. Okay. This is from ABC News also. What do you got for a
more than 30 million people under flood alerts in the Northeast.
Yeah. Flood alerts are in effect for over 30 million people in 11 states from Virginia to Maine Saturday night. Now, that was last Saturday, with both flood watches and coastal flood alerts. The Northeast will see rain and possible flooding after the Southeast had strong winds, rising waters, and even a tornado.
So it's not hitting our part of Vermont, but it is hitting Vermont.
We had some rain as part of this. It wasn't big rain. It was just,
not much to think of at all.
No, but there were places where there was a lot of rain.
Oh, yeah, there were.
And, it is so weird because we're having warnings that there isn't enough snow, that this drought is in place, that all these terrible things are happening because it's too dry. And then at the same time, we're having warnings because there's too much water, too much snow. And it's just...
Sounds contradictory, doesn't it?
It does, but we're talking about different parts of the United States. The current drought problems are in the Midwest. California, we reported last week that California had upwards of 10 feet of snow in some places.
Yeah.
And there was flooding on the East Coast. So now our next item is a supernal EVTOL.
I'll take take your word for it.
And it's a story from Clean Technica. And here, I guess all of the propellers either point backwards, so they're pusher type of propellers, or they point up. But if you look at the way those propellers that point up are attached, you might figure out that they are
They spin down.
They will go down when the plane has enough speed. So, as I said, from Clean Technica, what do you have for a title?
Electric aircrafts will need powerful ports.
Yep. Electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft might quickly move passengers over mountains or float them across urban scapes. But an important consideration for these flying batteries is where they will charge and whether the existing power grid infrastructure can satisfy the demand.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, this is a real problem. And
they need power. Where can they get it?
Exactly. And of course, one of the things that can be done, because batteries are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, is that they could have batteries that just draw power continually, unless they get filled, but can dump that power very, very quickly onto one of these vehicles when it lands. So this is stuff that they can figure out without too much difficulty, I don't think. Okay.
It's just new technology to them, but they'll adapt.
Yeah, they'll have it figured out. Okay, we have an item from Enquirer.net and a picture of a wind farm. What do you got?
Irish firm wins a government contract to build 440 megawatts of wind power.
Mainstream Renewable Power Limited something's wrong with the way this is written. Okay, Mainstream Renewable Power Limited won 2 contracts to build 2 onshore wind projects in the Philippines. So this is an Irish company that is going to build 2 projects in the Philippines. The government said it signed contracts with Mainstream, this is the government of the Philippines, to build wind projects with a combined capacity of 440 megawatts in the Cagayan province and in Leyte. So what do you think, Tom?
Oh, it's interesting because the Irish firm isn't building very much wind power on Ireland.
On Ireland, yeah. Well, I think they're building more on Ireland, but they've been busy all over the world. I'm always interested in things that happen on Leyte because my father was in the Battle of Leyte Gulf.
Oh, famous battle.
Yeah, he was on a Fletcher-class destroyer, and he watched the Japanese battleship, I think it was the Fuso, get cut in half.
What?
Yeah, it was not a good battle if you happen to be Japanese. Probably a battle you'd prefer to miss. Okay, should we go on, Tom?
Can't dance.
Okay, we have a picture of solar power, and this is from a publisher called RigZone, and I think that has to do with building things. What do you got for a title?
Equinor launches 531 megawatt solar plant in Brazil. Now that's a good sized solar plant.
That is a very good sized solar plant. Equinor ASA, that is not Ecuador, it is Equinor, has launched its 531 megawatt Mendubim solar plant, and I don't know how to pronounce Portuguese, so I'm not going to bother. Marking a 30% increase in its equity power production in Brazil. The plant will produce 1.2 terawatt hours annually, according to...
That's terawatts. That's a lot.
That's a lot of power, yeah.
It's bigger than gigawatts.
That's bigger. Well, we're talking about terawatt hours here, so...
Yeah, right.
As opposed to gigawatt hours. A gigawatt hour is not quite as impressive as a gigawatt. That's around 60% of the energy will be sold under a 20-year power purchase agreement with Alu Norte. Now that means 40% of it is just going to be sold on the market, probably at spot prices. So, but that's a big deal. Okay, our next picture is a picture of Alberta.
Oh, you couldn't prove it by me.
Now this is from Energy Now. That's pretty countryside, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's nice.
And you can see the mountains, which I presume are the Canadian Rockies in the distance.
They're in British Columbia, actually.
What?
They're in British Columbia.
They are? Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, Alberta's pretty flat.
Not all of it, though. Some of it, in fact, for next week, we're going to have a picture of Alberta, which is actually in the Canadian Rockies, and you're in the Rockies. What do you have for title?
Alberta's, quote, roping in on renewables could hurt $11 billion of Canadian dollars in investments.
Alberta's ban on some renewable projects could hurt 11.1 billion Canadian dollars, which is $8.42 billion US, in investments and stall up to 6.3 gigawatts of solar and wind power capacity, a study by the Pembina Institute said. The new rules potentially affect 42 projects and thousands of jobs. Now, this is a little distressing because it looks to me like, I don't know, it looks to me like the government of Alberta is just doing whatever the fossil fuels industry wants it to do. There was another article on this that appeared today from a different organization which said the concerns that they expressed that putting in all this renewable capacity would be dreadful to their prime farmland. Those concerns were
propaganda to me.
What's that?
Sounds like propaganda to me.
That's exactly what it said. This is a study, but it just said this is not true. The solar power, actually the thing that appeared today said, if you put all of the proposed upcoming renewable energy plants up until the year 2041, and that's many plants that have not been approved, if you put all of those on prime farming land, it would use 1% of the province's prime farming land.
Well, that's not much.
No, it's not. And as a matter of fact, I will tell you, I'm going to write an article about this weekend, so we'll talk about this coming up. I have discovered that if you look at if you put enough solar panels on agricultural land, or on any land actually, if you put up enough solar panels to power the United States completely, it would require something like 13.6 million acres. That's a lot. But it is only something like 60% of the land that we're using to grow corn for corn ethanol, which is going into gasoline. Now, if we did that thing with the solar panels on any land, it doesn't matter what, it would mean that the corn gasoline, we wouldn't have any use for it. So that 22.5 million acres that are being used for growing corn for ethanol would no longer have to be used for growing corn for ethanol.
Bingo.
So if we put if we put solar panels sufficient to power the entire country onto agricultural land and caused thereby 22.5 million acres to be taken out of production for corn ethanol, it would actually mean that we would be freeing up by putting all of the solar panels we needed to power the country on agricultural land. It would free up millions of acres of agricultural land. What's that?
I was just going to say it's going to free up a lot of land.
That's right. On the other hand, if you took those panels and you put them on non-agricultural land, we'd probably lose 20 million or more acres of agricultural land because we wouldn't have a reason to plant them anymore because we wouldn't be growing corn ethanol. This is very counterintuitive, but basically we can save agricultural land by stopping the use of other forms of energy besides solar. And of course, you know, I went through some other things. We could get 10% of our energy by covering the tops of mountains that have had their mountaintops removed for coal. If we covered those mountaintops, 500 plus mountaintops in the Central Appalachians.
And they're all flat.
They're all flat and they don't hold soil because they haven't been properly taken care of. If we planted that with solar panels, we could produce 10% of our electricity using land that we don't have any use for at all.
Right then and there.
Yeah, okay. All right, so what do we got for our next thing? Ah, yes, here we go. This is an article from Clean Technica, and that is a picture of a tidal energy project on the Mersey River, or the River Mersey if you prefer.
Now, where's the Mersey?
The Mersey runs from England into the Irish Sea at Liverpool. If you remember, about the time the Beatles were singing, there was a song called "Ferry Cross the Mersey."
The Mersey, right?
Yeah. So what do you have for a title?
Magnificent tidal energy project to double as a new city park.
Yeah. The International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that a global amount of technically recoverable zero-emission electricity from tidal motion would add up to 1,000 gigawatts. Now, that's the equivalent of...
Tidal motion, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is just tidal motion. This is 1,000 gigawatts, which is the equivalent of probably about 400 large nuclear reactors. I'm giving that relationship because a nuclear reactor, it would be the equivalent of 500 nuclear reactors if it ran 100% of the time. But while the tide is reversing, you're not going to get any electricity. But that doesn't last very long. And then it goes on. And that's just counting locations near coastlines. The world has been getting experience in this technology already. So there you go.
So they're going to make a city park out of it.
They can, you know. There you've got a picture of people bicycling and, you know, doing stuff with a ship in the background, you know, sided up to a wharf, and, you know, there it all is. People can go.
Kind of a long, skinny city park.
Yes, it's a long, skinny city park. It's kind of like that city they were proposing for Saudi Arabia, where the city was going to be 400 miles long and, I don't know, 200 yards across. Anyway,
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. Anyway, we're up to Wednesday, March 13th, and we have a picture of a painting and coating facility in Colombia. And this particular article comes from Akzo Nobel. Akzo Nobel. So what do you got?
So Nobel uses 100% renewable electricity in Latin America.
Right. All of Akzo Nobel's manufacturing locations in Latin America are now operating on 100% renewable energy. That's for the entire continent. Actually, Latin America, it's more than South America because it includes Mexico.
Yes.
The company's ambition, and by the way, that's just our way of reckoning the difference between North and South America. Some Spanish-speaking people and other people regard North and South America as parts of one continent they call America. The company's ambition is to reduce carbon emissions across the full value chain by 50% by 2030. This is with a 2018 baseline. It had achieved that goal already in Europe and North America. So they're getting ahead of the game here. And
Seems like they are.
I'm going to put this picture back up and point out, in this picture, there is what looks like a superhighway, possibly, running from about a quarter of the way up on the left, almost to the top right corner. And the buildings on the near side of that all have almost.
They all have solar.
They almost all have, all of the large buildings have solar panels on the roof. Okay?
Yep.
So, let's go on to the next one. And our next one is a picture of a pumped storage plant in the UK. And this story comes from the UK Parliament.
Well, what does pumped storage mean?
Oh, yes. Why don't you read the headline? I'll read the synopsis and then we'll talk.
Government must act now on energy storage.
Right. A UK parliamentary committee report on long-duration energy storage concludes that the government must act fast to ensure that energy storage technologies can can scale up in time to meet a vital role in decarbonizing the electricity system and ensuring an energy security by 2035. Okay, what is
One way of storing energy is with water, but there are other ways of storing it.
Pumped storage is actually an old way of doing things. I think the first pumped storage plant in the United States was in Connecticut, and I think it's just about 100 years old. This is an old technology that has been well known. There was a time...
They pump water uphill and use it when they want it.
That's right. When you have excess electricity, you use it to pump water uphill. When you don't have enough electricity, you use the water that you've pumped up the hill to make electricity.
Bingo. Says to me.
Yeah. There was a time, when I was probably 20, 1973, I think, was the date that Vermont Yankee opened up. And when Vermont Yankee was built, it was recognized that it was going to produce more electricity that could be used on the grid in its location. So the question is, what do you do with that excess electricity? You could build bigger transmission system to move it into some other place, but what they decided to do, and it wasn't Vermont Yankee's decision, it was another company, as I recall, was to build a pumped storage plant in Northfield, Massachusetts. And that plant...
That's still there.
Still there, still working. What they do is
I've been there.
Yeah, so have I. That plant pumps water from the Connecticut River up to the top of a mountain, which is kind of on the border between Northfield and Irving, Massachusetts. And they do that during the nighttime when, the Vermont Yankee plant, baseload power plants can't slow down or speed up easily. So they just kept it going 24 hours a day. And during the night when there was too much electricity, they used it to pump the water up to the top of a mountain.
So they saved.
Yeah. And then during the daytime when there wasn't enough electricity, they used the water at the top of the mountain to make...
Makes sense to me.
Yep. And that plant had, at one time, the biggest water turbines on Earth. It was the biggest pumped storage facility on Earth. It isn't anymore. These things can make money, so they do. Now, our last story, we have a picture of a coral reef and a story from ABC News. What do you got for a title?
Researchers discover new technique to encourage the restoration of degraded corals. Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of amazing how they did this. Researchers have discovered a way to encourage restoration of coral reef populations degraded by record high marine temperatures. Underwater speaker, that play the sounds of a healthy reef were found to help coral larvae settle up to 7 times as fast.
Who'd have thunk?
Who'd have thunk? Yeah, that's exactly right. Who'd have thunk? So that's the end of our last story. Is your cat around, Tom?
No, so as I can see.
Okay, we should tell the people who are watching that they should have an acceptably wonderful week.
I think so.
I think so too. So we're up to the end of the story. Yeah, we're up to the end of the show. So I'm going to wave goodbye, and I happen to know, because I have utter confidence in Tom, that he is actually sitting at home waving goodbye at this very second.
I'm doing exactly that.
See, I told you so. But his cat is AWOL.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So have a good week, and Tom, you have the last thing to say.
You all come back now and see us, you hear?
This reminds me of what I call New England hot. This is what I refer to when you're talking about chili. A New England hot is something that a New Englander would call hot, but nobody else would.
I hear you.
My mother lived for years in Texas, and she came up, and she and I went to the Wendy's in Keene, and she ordered chili, and I said to her as she was eating, "How's your chili?" And she said, "Oh, it's good, but it's not chili." And I said, "What is it?" And she said, "Well, it's goulash." Goulash is New England hot. Chili should be a little hotter than a New Englander can stand. So,
Makes sense.
there you have it. Tom, thank you very much.